We're back for week 7, where we're going to be talking about challenges to institutional review boards. And before we get into that, I want to compliment everybody on the discussion board this week. You guys are doing a great job on that. Some good comments. We just want to make sure that everybody understands that the financial disclosure issues that we've been talking about apply to an investigator's financial stake in a sponsor, not necessarily what they get paid to conduct the trial. If the sponsors didn't pay them, they probably wouldn't get very many investigators to participate. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that. So at any rate, look at some of my comments that I've made on there with some of your specific comments on the this week's discussion board. So this week we're going to be talking about institutional review boards, how they operate and how they're structured, and also we're going to be looking at some of the essential regulatory documents that sites, investigators, and sponsors are required to have on file before a site can start commencing with enrolling patients at their site. So I've stored all those in a folder, in the week 7 folder, so you'll find them in there. You'll find some examples, and if you look in the folder, you'll see that there is an explanation of each one. So I do want you to kind of take a look at those and be familiar with them. As some of you get out and start working in the industry, you're going to see a lot of those. And so it's important that you understand what they look like and the types of information that are on each one. So, but at any rate, what I do want to discuss this week is to understand that the primary function of the Institutional Review Board is to protect human subjects that participate in clinical research studies. So they have a number of obligations that they have to abide by in order to support that function. Our learning objectives for this week will be to identify the structure and purpose of an IRB, and also to discuss the essential documents that are required of sites and sponsors in a clinical trial. And I've offered examples of those in the essential documents folder and the week 7 folder on Blackboard. Your readings for this week include the article Monitoring Clinical Research, which is located on page 425 in your textbook. So I'd like you to take a look at that and be familiar with some of the issues that are associated with monitoring research and with ethics committees and IRBs and those types of things as we go along in the week. Also, the essential documents that we have talked about or that we'll be looking at are listed in ICH E6 section 8. You can find that online. I've put the link out there, but it's the same link, the same information that we were looking at earlier in our GCP training. So you'll find that. There'll be a description of each document. Some of the documents you may not collect in a trial. Just depends on what it is, but probably for most of them, you're going to come across those at some point during the trial. And that applies to people that work on the site side of a trial and also those that work on the sponsor side as well. And then finally, 21 CFR 56 is the regulation that governs institutional review boards. It's about 14 pages long. It's not very long. But I'll put a PDF document out there on Blackboard that you can review, or if you want to go online and pull it down from there, that's fine too. But it'll discuss the issues associated with institutional review boards. So just to introduce you briefly to institutional review boards, I want you to understand that the IRBs are central to North America. So we find them in the United States, also in Canada. Around the world, they're normally called ethics committees, but they serve the same purpose. So the regulations that we work with regarding IRBs are normally FDA regulations, and they're contained in that 21 CFR subpart 56 document that we'll go over. Some of the essential documents that we're going to talk about, you're probably wondering, well, what in the world is an essential document? It's essentially a regulatory document that's required by the regulatory authority to be collected either before the trial commences or during the trial, and actually those will be listed in that order in the ICH E6 Section 8. So let me go over these real quickly for you. FDA Form 1572, it's a 2-page form. This is the Statement of Investigator. It is a contract between the investigator and the FDA. It's not a contract between the investigator and the sponsor. It basically indicates that the investigator is going to conduct the trial based on the protocol and based on the GCP requirements, the good clinical practice requirements that we studied in week 3. And if they fail to do that, then they risk running afoul of the law to include imprisonment if their transgression is of an egregious nature. So every investigator has to sign that document before they get started with their trial. The principal investigator's curriculum vitae is just their CV that outlines where they went to medical school and all that good stuff. The investigator brochure signature page just indicates that they received the investigator brochure, they read it, they understood it, and they sign and date that and send it back to the sponsor. They're required to get their protocol approved by an IRB. The investigator is required to do that. The sponsor does not do that. And then they'll get an IRB approval letter, which lasts for 1 year. The approval lasts for 1 year, and they can conduct the research at their site according to the protocol, and it has some other stipulations in there as well. And I've put a sample of one out there on Blackboard so you can see that. The IRB also approves their informed consent form. I've also put the sample of a financial disclosure form out there. It's 1 page. It basically indicates, asks the investigator, and this is also true of others that work on the trial, to indicate whether or not they have a financial stake of any kind in the sponsor. You'll also see a copy of the principal investigator medical license. You want to know what those look like. You'll also see some CLIA and CAP certificates. These are accreditation certificates for laboratories. So I want you to take a look at those so you see what they look like as well. Every lab has to be, properly accredited that functions within a clinical trial to certify that the lab values that they present are indeed accurate. And then finally, you'll have a lab range document that will provide what the normal values, the ranges for normal values for the various labs that we'll likely collect during our trial. So there's no discussion board this week. Instead, go ahead and get started on Project 2. You'll find that in the assignments folder under Project 2. And what we're going to be doing, we're going to be revisiting those 3 historical ethical documents that we looked at earlier in the course. The Nuremberg Code, the Belmont Report, and the Declaration of Helsinki. You get to choose one, and then compose a short summary of it, answering a couple questions that are listed in the project assignment that you'll see on Blackboard. So you probably want to go back and, depending on which one you choose, go ahead and maybe reread that again, kind of go over it again so you'll be a little more familiar with it, and then go ahead and compose your response to that, and then go ahead and turn that in using the assignment tab in Blackboard. You'll see it up there. You just click on the link at the top, and then it'll open up a window, and then you just go down to number 2, I believe, and then select the file that you're going to upload to it and press submit, and you'll have it up there. So at any rate, go ahead and get going on that. This week you won't have any discussion board, so that's great. That'll be due on Sunday, May 3rd. So you'll have the entire week to get that completed. If there are questions that you have, put them out there on the questions for this, excuse me, questions for instructor on the discussion board, and I can respond to those. If you need to respond to me privately, you can do so via email. That'll be fine. So at any rate, have a great week, and I will see you next week.